All right, welcome to this Thirsty Thursday edition of Liquid Lunch on Biz TV. I'm John Tobacco, coming to you live as we do every single day lately from the Corona Bunker Studios in my living room in Staten Island, New York. Lots going on this Thirsty Thursday. I'm thirsty for some news. I'm thirsty for some baseball, I hope, which starts tonight. Taking a look at the markets, the Dow did pop its head over 27,000. It was a key number I was talking to you about yesterday. It did close above there yesterday, but not able to hold those gains today at 26.9. But if it keeps getting up above there, closes, I'm telling you, I think next week there's going to be some tremendous news from our president. Mark it down. You heard it here first. But this landmark Supreme Court ruling apparently opened the door for the president expanding his executive powers a lot. I think he's going to use that. Me personally, I think he's going to use that for a payroll tax cut, which is going to be a great stimulus for all small businesses. I was on Frank Morano's radio show the other day, the Frank Morano program, and you know, I was talking to my buddy Johnny McDonough, who's a humorist, writer, playwright, New York City taxi driver, veteran. And he was saying that payroll tax isn't really going to do much because, you know, you can't get a payroll tax if you don't have a job. And the thing people don't realize is the payroll tax both increases the amount of money in the pocket of the business owner, and he can hire more people, and the people who are on payroll will get a 7% increase in their pocket. So it's stimulative to both the employers and the employees. I think that's coming our way, and that will make the market feel a lot better, I could tell you that. I did want to point out today that I don't often brag about my son. Yeah, I'm always talking about my daughters, Victoria and Ava, and they have actually been on the show, and Ava works on the show, but John, he gets the short end of the stick sometimes, you know what I mean? Not here, but he is the prince. But I thought it would be a good little anecdotal story to say, I've been coaching him in baseball since he's 5. And you know, one of the things we're screwing up on here in America are the basics, the fundamentals. How did this country start? What are the 4 pillars of our democracy? And since my son was like 5, I coached his team, and every kid on my team learned how to catch, throw, and bunt. Okay? Bunting is like a simple thing. It's a little bit of a lost art, but I made sure every one of my kids knew these basic fundamentals, so when they went on in life, their coaches would say, somebody taught him at least the fundamentals. Not that I'm the greatest coach. My son used to get mad at me when I gave him the bunt sign because he wanted to swing away. He wanted to hit a home run, and I kept telling him it's so important to learn the basics, which we're forgetting in this country. And at the ripe old age of 14, it was a quite emotional moment for me to see that he finally realized that the fundamentals matter. And yesterday, with the Staten Island Orioles, his travel team, a phenomenal bunch of young men. They pray after the games. They had just a great bunch of boys, great coach, great parents around the team. And, you know, my son's up in a spot in a tight game, and there's a man on third, and the winning run is on third. And the coach gives him the sign for the suicide squeeze play, which is one of the most dangerous plays in baseball. And you need a good bunter up at bat. And this is what happened when my son used some of the basics he's been practicing since he's 5. Take a look at this. Get a little choked up seeing that. The guy learned the fundamentals, like we need to teach our kids about this country. And when he was put in a position to use them, he used his talent and executed. That's what we got to do as Americans. Congratulations to my son and the Orioles. Great win. God bless you. We'll take a quick break and come back with more Liquid Lunch right after this. Welcome back. You're watching Liquid Lunch on Biz TV. I'm John Tobacco, and there's so much craziness going on in our world, and I talk all the time about the pillars of our democracy. Our country was founded on faith and family and all those good things. And, you know, in God we trust is on our bills. And everyone's caught up with the confusion between the sentence Black Lives Matter, which everyone would say, of course they do. That, of course, all lives matter. And the truism hidden behind a hashtag, Black Lives Matter, which is really a front organization for a bunch of Marxist anarchists. And people are getting so caught up in this trick that now we have the mainstream media coming out and belittling the president for using our law enforcement, our federal law enforcement, to go out and protect federal properties from these anarchists. It gets crazier by the minute, but I'm just an opinion guy on TV, and a guy who's been in the trenches at all levels joins us to break it down a little further. Bob Barr joins us right now. Bob Barr, if you don't know, was a congressman from Georgia, former federal prosecutor, and former CIA analyst. So he knows about as much about this as anybody out there. Mr. Barr, thank you so much for joining us again. Is Trump in his right here to engage these, you know, what I would call a terrorist organization who's trying to change our country? Is he right to use federal law enforcement?
He is absolutely correct, and if he didn't, he would be derelict in his duty as the President of the United States. Sending federal sworn law enforcement officers to cities where federal facilities and federal personnel are being endangered by violent thugs, and sending federal law enforcement agents and prosecutors to prosecute violations of federal law is, again, not only good and righteous and appropriate for the president, but if he didn't do it, he should be impeached. So,
well, I'm sure they'd never impeach him for that, but they've tried on a whole bunch of other ludicrous levels. I don't know if, I'm sure you're following this Kayleigh McEnany, the new press secretary, and it seems like, you know, if the president and the administration don't send her out there, then they want to know, where is she? Why aren't she asking a question? Then when they do send her out there, it's like an orchestrated effort to gotcha. Everybody wants to get you. And the other day, she kind of just cited some, you know, the reporters saying, well, was the president is right. And she kind of just cited federal code as, you know, anywhere there's a federal building under attack being threatened, we have every right to go down there. Why does the mainstream media not even want to look at our own federal rules and just try to make it into, you know, an opinion debate?
It's because the left and the mainstream media and academicians and the Democrat Party have become absolutely consumed with their hatred for Trump. And their hatred for Trump colors everything that they do right now. They don't care what the law is. They don't care what the facts are. They don't care who gets hurt. All that they want to do is do everything possible to ensure that President Trump is not reelected. They have no regard for people. They have no regard for our country. And if, in fact, President Trump were to be defeated, we would see a very, very swift descent into absolute chaos in this country, economic, social, political, and from a society standpoint.
Yeah, it seems pretty scary. Hey, I want to ask you something. This may be, you know, still within some of your classifications, if you still have low-level classifications, but I've been trying to, there's so many conspiracy theories out there, the Q, the 4chan, this, that, all these other things, right? And, you know, try to be a good newsman. I'm doing homework on top of homework. Do you think it's okay to be reliant on Freedom of Information Act documents? Is that like a good source in your view as a CIA analyst?
It can be. The problem with FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, is that, one, they often take a long time to get the information. But more importantly, there are so many exceptions written into the Freedom of Information Act law, both the federal and many of the state counterparts, that what you do often is, even if you get back something, it has been heavily redacted. In other words, black lined, because There might be information regarding a personnel matter or an ongoing investigation or sensitive classified information. But if you look, for example, at some of the work that the Judicial Watch has done over the years, they have become masters at using the FOIA very effectively. But just for the average person to rely on the FOIA to get information is, to be honest, not very productive the way the law is set up.
So yeah, that leads me to my next question. So I've been, for research, putting a little more weight behind already publicly released FOIA documents that they're the government documents, unless someone's posting something fake, but I don't see that. There's seems to be government records that are 30 and 40 years old that have been obtained through Judicial Watch and others that demonstrate that the CIA has had a long-standing relationship with Hollywood and the major entertainment companies that control television, movies, and radio entertainment. And I feel like that, you know, while it seems like there are thousands of choices out there, it really all comes down to like three major media organizations: Disney, Time Warner, Comcast. These control all these other channels. Do you think that there is some coordination at some level between the CIA and the major entertainment companies that allow the media to be so tilted?
There is, and there has been, and it's very troubling, not only because our intelligence community and our foreign intelligence agencies are supposed to be insulated from becoming involved in domestic matters and focus on international matters, and they have very extensive powers not available to law enforcement to do that. But also, the problem is, in recent years, the technological interfacing between technology companies here domestically and the media industry, which relies on that technology, using or interfacing in partnership with intelligence agencies, and including the FBI also, its intelligence arm, because they both, that is, these government agencies and corporate America, including Hollywood, which is very corporate these days, they both rely on technology to obtain information and database information, maybe for different purposes. Commercial industry uses it for commercial purposes, advertising and identifying consumer tastes and so forth. The government uses databasing of personal and private information that they can gain through partnership with these private and commercial entities. They use it to database information that can be used to invade the privacy of individuals. So it is a problem that has grown in importance because of the technology in recent years, and getting to the bottom of it is something that Congress ought to be doing far more intently than it has been.
Yeah, it seems to me that, you know, there's mounting evidence out there that these major media companies actually control the narrative that goes even down to local news broadcast channels of what they want the public to hear. And even though Trump has found, you know, Twitter, it's like, you know, one man against a mob as far as I could see it, because he you know, they're controlling the message so badly. I've never seen a president attacked this much in my whole life. I'm 52 years old.
Well, I'm a little bit older, and I have never seen it either. It was bad under President Nixon, but far worse nowadays. And your point about local media being controlled by these international conglomerates for their news sources and what they distribute and disseminate to the American people is very, very important and very much on point. As media, as the electronic media overtakes local newspapers, for example, and even state and national newspapers that are losing readership, those newspapers, those that have continued to be able to survive, rely more and more not on local, hands-on, on-the-ground reporting, but simply on what they get from a handful of media sources.
Yep.
And then that becomes, a snowballing effect. They rely on it. They lose readership. They rely on it more. And local media becomes largely simply a mouthpiece for the liberal national media.
Thank you so much. That you couldn't have said it better, and that's why we bring this guy on, because he's the best out there. Mr. Barr, thank you so much for joining us on Liquid Lunch, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. All right, you're watching Liquid Lunch, where we serve you the news with the booze. We're going to take a quick break, crack open a cold one. We'll be back right after this. Okay, welcome back, and you're watching Liquid Lunch on Biz TV. There's a lot going on out there that's driving me berserko. But in these little news of the day segments, I like to go on my own little rants and talk to you, my friends out there, and talk about how I really feel without getting crazy about it. But did point out the greatness of my son in segment one, and I always point out the greatness of our audience. We have a tremendous amount of friends and fans and family out there that tune in every day. Quick look at the markets. Dow still under 27 at down 85 bucks. Bitcoin, as I mentioned yesterday, at 9,500, and looks like it's well on its way to 10,000. So anybody who wants to know a little more about Bitcoin, how you can buy fractional shares or anything, reach out to me. I'll give you a hand. I'm not an advisor. I don't take commissions or anything, but if I can help you, I will. And Overstock up another $1.50 today at 56.25. Yee-hee. That's good news. For those of you watching, I think it's going to 100. I don't have any information or anything. I just think it's hot on the tail of Wayfair, and it should be worth at least half of Wayfair. That I could tell you. One of the things that I love about our audience is I get a ton of feedback. I try to delve it out when I can. I try to include it in the show. And I always talk about sometimes we got haters. And the haters are good for business too. And don't forget, everything, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You need both sides, like the yin and the yang. So if there was no haters, there would be no lovers. So we need hate to have love. It's just part of the universe. So, and the haters are good. They tune in every day. But I did want to point out someone who went from a big fan of the show and used to correspond with me and send me things, and I take objective criticism very poorly. I will admit that. I don't like getting corrected, as you could see at the end of the show when Nico and Jess make things up about me. But this person used to watch all the time and tell me if I was good, tell me if I was bad. A lot of times scruffle it up, but I'm good. I try to answer everyone as much as I can. So Kathy from Lutz, Florida, she works in the post office. She was a fan. And then she got turned off by some stuff. And she sent me an email the other day after she turned into a hater. And she said, JT, I've been waiting for you to return to Newsmax. I missed the show. I looked you up on YouTube and watched your Friday show while I'm here at work. You still got it. Very entertaining. You look even better in a t-shirt than you do all dolled up. I don't know about that. Is there a petition or a drive to get back on? I'm on. Sorry for being nasty with you. I don't mean it. I wish you all the best. And then I answered her, hey, bygones are bygones. There she is. You're my friend and everything else. And this is the sign of good people. Put that back up for 1 minute, Nico. That sometimes through the power of love, you can change people back to the good side. They come to the white. And you see what Kathy responded to me there to show that she was back on the team. So happy you replied to me. Girls can be D words too. And, we're adults, and I blacked it out there. So, but everybody, she's kind of admitting like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry I was being so awful. And it happens. I'm awful sometimes too. You should see what I do to the team over here when we're not on there. I forget about it. Horrible. Unspeakable, terrible things. But And they get me back. They put food on my desk that they tell me is like baklava, but I don't even know what was in that stuff. They may have poisoned me the other day, quite frankly, but yesterday I washed it all down with some fresh minty homemade lemonade from Mesa, which was excellent. So I don't know what was in that baklava the other day. But Kathy, welcome back, my dear, and put it on in the post office for everyone on your Facebook or on YouTube, because everyone is welcome. It's a big tent here on Liquid Lunch. Now, you want to hear craziness, okay, with all this plant-based and all the who's a vegan? Everybody's a vegan. If you want to invest in something, here's some business advice. Find anything you can and call it vegan. Because all these kids that are out protesting right now because they're not in school and they're not at work and they're getting unemployment and everything, they're all vegans, okay? Trust me, that's just the new cool thing to do, is be a vegan. So anything you sell, just write vegan on it. Even if it's not, tell them it's vegan and they'll probably buy it like mad. Nah, don't do that. It's false advertising. But KFC, the Colonel Sanders will probably be turning over in his grave right now when I talk about this story. Just breaking news yesterday, KFC is using animal flesh cells to 3D print chicken meat in a Russian lab. KFC is working with a Russian 3D bioprinting company to create lab-produced chicken nuggets. Fast food giant has announced that this is the meat of the future concept. They're taking the next step in innovative concept of creating a restaurant of the future, crafting the meat of the future. So let me get this straight. You're taking your life in your hands in the first place if you're eating from KFC, because you don't even know what's in the actual chicken that's buried under all that delicious Colonel Sanders crunchy covering, okay? You don't even know what's in that chicken there. And by the way, if you take a look behind it, what's in them chickens, forget about it. They shoot them up with stuff. They keep them in pens. They got all kinds of carcinogens in them. When they squeeze 10 billion chickens into one little chicken coop, all their insides, their enzymes are up, their glands are going off, so they're almost like poisoning themselves before you even get it. And then they insert bleach so that the white meat looks whiter and all this other stuff. So you're already taking your life in your hands going to KFC, but I do it. I love it. The buffalo popcorn bites, so good. Delicious, actually. The one thing is these printers that we buy, they're so cheap. You could go buy a printer for $150. But the cartridges for the printers are like $40, $60. And every 2 weeks, the cartridge is dead. So the cartridges are so expensive. So I asked Jess, my producer, last night, how much could a chicken meat cartridge cost if a freaking printer cartridge is $60? Where do we get these chicken meat cartridges? I don't understand what's happening here, but they're going to bioprint chicken nuggets. Now, if you ever look inside some of these processed nuggets, they're already bioprinted, because I don't even know what that meat is in there. It's hard to tell. But KFC is somehow teaming up with Russia, another one of our buddies out there in the world, to bioprint us some 3D chickens. And supposedly this is this is the future of the restaurant industry, is to get 3D printed chicken meat from Russia. And we're all supposed to be happy about this. I don't know. It's just, is it a good story? No, it's a scary story. And the one thing I can tell you is, if you want to know what's really good for you, when you do eat those processed nuggets from basically anywhere, just don't look inside. You know what I mean? It's like a haunted house. If you're going in, expect to be scared. But you're better off just closing your eyes and whipping them down. Put a whole bunch of sauce and slather some salt to ketchup on there. But I vote no on 3D chicken meat printing, and I do. If anybody out there can let me know, I would like to know how much one cartridge of 3D chicken bio meat is on the open market. And we'll take a quick break. We're going to come back right after this with, let's see, I got so many notes today, so much to talk about. John Banzaf is going to be here, public interest attorney, and one of my great friends, great participant on the show. Quick break, and be back with the good counselor right after.
5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Liquid Lunch on Biz TV, where we cover the gamut of topics of things that you're interested in, hopefully. And we try to break it up, bring in all kinds of experts from all different places. I do want to point out that some years ago, there was another one of these protests in New York called Occupy Wall Street, where this same bunch of hooligans was shacking up in a park, Zuccotti Park in New York City, and it was right by Wall Street. And when people going to work with suits and ties on were walking by, they would be throwing things at you, screaming things at you, yelling things at you. My brother Derek and I, were fed up with it, and we started a counter-protest called Occupy a Desk, Get a Job, which we had our First Amendment right to stand there right across the street from and say this, and we got attacked. It was actually fun just to show how intolerant these people are. But it seems like these days First Amendment is very selective. Like who can use it, who doesn't get to use it, and one of the great public interest attorneys on the planet Earth joins us all the time. He's always right on top of things, got his finger on the pulse. John Banzaf is with us again, and John is a professor over at the esteemed George Washington University Law School. And if anybody knows about First Amendment, it's you, my friend. So these Black Lives Matter paintings are being allowed to be permitted to be painted in mostly blue cities around the country. And they're using the First Amendment. And you're saying there's a growing thing out there where other people are using the First Amendment to combat that.
Well, that's exactly right. The First Amendment isn't biased. It is supposed to apply to all causes equally. And as I predicted, people are now using the First Amendment to fight back against this idea that a cause, no matter how righteous some people may think it is, don't have a right to paint their own signs on city streets and to exclude others. So, for example, a day or so ago, a woman in Redwood City simply said, I want to be able to counter that Black Lives Movement, which is painted on a street in Redwood City. I want to put up MAGA 2020, which is obviously a somewhat different slant. And the city immediately backed down. They said they would no longer permit their streets to be used that way, and they painted over the Black Lives Matter on the street. Well, I predicted at that time others would use the same argument. And it now turns out that there are about a dozen cities where Black Lives Matter signs and murals and so on have been painted on streets. And a new group, presumably an anti-abortion group, has come in and they've demanded the right to put up their signs. They want to say Black preborn lives matter. Again, a slightly different viewpoint. But under the First Amendment, the city can't permit one viewpoint and not another. You can't permit Black Lives Matter and then not permit, for example, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, or whatever. So the First Amendment is an important tool here, and I predict that more and more groups will decide they want their messages up, and eventually the cities are going to have to return to a state of normalcy where people just don't have the right to paint their own messages on the street, no matter how good or important they think their cause is.
So what you're saying is, for years, I guess, public domain like streets and sidewalks have been accepted or permissible to be a forum for art and expression of First Amendment. That's allowed.
Right. Here we have a slightly different size. Certainly in terms of simply marching, demonstrating, assembling, and so on, a city cannot say it's okay for X group to do it and not for Y group. It has to be what we call content neutral. But that's because traditionally, for hundreds of years, people have used city streets to demonstrate. However, it certainly is not the custom or tradition for people to be able to paint city streets. If I went out into New York or Washington tomorrow and decided to paint something on a street, I would be arrested. But when a city or any municipal entity decides to permit, or to allow something to be used for public expression, then once again, it must be contract neutral. A great Supreme Court decision. It was Tennessee. Cincinnati, Tennessee had a municipal auditorium. They didn't have to rent it out, but they decided they would. They would allow plays to be produced there. Then when people wanted to put on Hair, which of course had a strong anti-war, pro-hippie semblance.
Yeah, I've been trying to put on Hair
They
for
said
like
no,
15 years.
and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't discriminate. Once you say that one group can use it, once you open it up as a public forum, then you cannot base it on the viewpoint or the content. I think the analogy to the city streets is exactly the same. Ordinarily, you can't go around painting city streets, but if they say to one group, sure, go ahead, paint the street. Hey, we'll even help you do it. We'll give you the paint. Then they have to do the same for other similarly situated groups.
So maybe you could help us and maybe give me a draft of a template, and I could start spreading it around the country to our audiences who they're not against Black Lives Matter, but people are becoming more and more frustrated, feeling like they don't have a voice in this anymore. The silent majority doesn't even have a platform to speak out. You got Twitter muting people, you got Facebook muting people, you got YouTube muting people. Can regular people just send a little letter into their local mayor or superintendent or county board and say, hey, I would like this message painted on a street, not even a particular street? Is that a good way to start?
Well, that's what a single woman, an attorney, did in Rosewood, California, and it worked for her. And you may remember, I got started in this whole public interest area when I demanded time to reply to one-sided presentations on television, that is, cigarette commercials. And in the end, I was given hundreds of millions of dollars worth of free time. We got rid of cigarette commercials. But I think it would be better if it came from some kind of a group, because under what we call a limited public forum, which is what painting on a street probably is, they can put some content neutral restrictions. They might say, for example, you have to be a recognized group, you have to be a tax-exempt organization, etc.
Got it.
Also,
So
any demand coming from a group is going to have much more clout. So I think it's doable.
That
it
makes
ought to
sense.
be done. And you don't have to be against Black Lives Matter, I think, to want to post something about Israel or Palestine. Take your choice. Or
Well, what about this? I'm half Italian, half Irish. Okay, I'm proud of both sides of my family ancestry and nation of origin, and I'm really perturbed about how no one sticks up for poor old Christopher Columbus. And the guy, did one noteworthy thing. He found the darn place where we call America. What if I teamed up with, my friend Andre Domino from the Italian American organization, and we started asking legislators or town councils to put Christopher Columbus matters? That sounds pretty benign.
I think if the Italian American organization made that request, or Italian Lives Matter, it would certainly have to be seriously considered. And if they denied the request, then you got a good First Amendment right to go into court. And what would be very interesting, I think, is whether or not the ACLU would back you. Because the ACLU has been very supportive of the Black Lives Movement, which is fine. That's their decision. But they've always maintained that, quote, the Constitution is our only client. They have been steadfast defenders of the First Amendment. So it'd be very interesting if they would be willing to represent you or any other group which says, we want to have our sign up because Black Lives Matter has their sign up. Will the ACLU go to court for you? That's going to be something which is going to be very interesting to see.
Well, I think I'm going to take up that cause, because I've had a number of Italian American organizational leaders on my show trying to bring attention to the fact that, there were times in America in the late 1800s and early 1900s where, Italians weren't even allowed to get city jobs. They were banned from city jobs, and, they just turned out to go out and be hardworking people and create new generations of hardworking people. And Christopher Columbus is an easy scapegoat because there's not a big organization to stick up for him. But I don't know if you've been following this. When you go to Black Lives Matter and you click on donate, it takes you to a website called Act Blue. And then if you go on Act Blue and you do a few more searches deeper into it, it turns out that Planned Parenthood and the ACLU are beneficiaries. So we might be up against the ACLU on this.
I think it'd be very interesting to challenge them, ask them to bring a lawsuit on your behalf or make a demand, and then if necessary, bring a lawsuit on your behalf. And if they refuse, that certainly would be something that ought to be brought to the public attention, because they claim that they are First Amendment first, that they represent the Constitution, and in situations where the Constitution might be contrary to the interests of Black Lives Matter or some justice organization or any other organization,
all right, well,
they should stand up for the First Amendment.
Johnny, thank you so much. We're out of time, but I'm going to report back to you on this. I'm gonna try to get something going here. Thank you.
Good for you. Good.
Quick break. We're out.
For more Liquid Lunch, head over to YouTube, do a search for Liquid Lunch TV, and hit that subscribe button.
All right, welcome back. Lots of breaking news today. This just in. Jess handed me this right here, breaking news. A federal judge on Thursday ordered Michael D. Cohen, famous Donald Trump rat, to be released into home confinement after finding that the federal officials had returned him to prison in retaliation for plans to write a tell-all memoir. The judge, Alvin K. Hellerstein, said prison officials had forced Mr. Cohen back to prison after he'd been released on medical furlough because of his desire. I make the finding that the purpose of transferring Mr. Cohen from furlough and home to jail is retaliatory. Its retaliation is because of his desire to exercise his First Amendment rights. Oh, boy. All right. Hey, look, I'll tell you this. I'm no fan of Michael Cohen, okay? I am a fan of First Amendment rights, and I do try to demonstrate them here every day. And he took the sentence. He actually gave the government a whole load of information on President Trump. It wasn't enough to get anything on the president, but he gave him a whole bunch of stuff. He had all kinds of other issues, taxi and limousine issues and fraudulent loans and all sorts of stuff, but he got jail time. And he reported, and he didn't make things up, or maybe he did make things up, but not enough to get anything on the president. He was in jail. And a lot of people are being released from jail because of COVID, nonviolent criminals. And he's a nonviolent criminal. If somebody in the Justice Department or the Federal Bureau of Prisons thought they could take away his First Amendment rights by telling him don't write a book, and at the same time hang it over his head that he may have to go back into jail for it, good for the judge to protect First Amendment rights. And we just had John Banzaf on, who was talking about how we have First Amendment rights that we can use to fight against the bastardization of some of the First Amendment rights that's going on out there, where you have actual local governments painting Black Lives Matter the truism, because if it was a sentence or a statement, it wouldn't be in all capitals. So they're standing with the organization Black Lives Matter, which is a Marxist organization committed to the destruction of the U.S. nuclear family and the breakdown and elimination of our religion and individuality. That's what Black Lives Matter is about. The truism, not the sentence. Okay? And hey, congrats to Mr. Cohen and his family, okay? And if you want to come on Liquid Lunch, Michael Cohen, get on here and let's hear your side of the story. And I'm sitting there waving the Trump flag. I got my Trump pen every day, but I'm all for our court system being that third leg of our great American democracy and meting out justices. If Michael Avenatti, the slimy, sleazy, scummy, loser, liar, thief of an attorney, can get released from prison after trying to shake down and extort Nike and others and playing around with his escrow account, if that guy can be released from prison, then I think Michael Cohen's right up there. And they were trying to send Roger Stone in. The president had to come in the last minute with a way to keep him out. So I'm all for it. You know what I mean? Nobody deserves to sit in jail for a nonviolent crime in a time where it could actually take your life because you're confined indoors with a whole bunch of people in a prison. So, all right, God bless his family. I'm sure they want their dad and their husband and their uncle and everything home. So it happens. Now, here in New York, especially in Staten Island, New York, which is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, we haven't had a COVID death in a while. Our ICUs are all free. We have plenty of respirators, ventilators, and all this other stuff. But we continue to get treated like the redheaded stepchild of New York City when Mayor de Blasio won't let certain things happen just on the merits of Staten Island's COVID stats, which are like at 0. So they're allowing outdoor dining. In some places, do the outdoor dining, and Governor Cuomo, King Cuomo III, as my friend Curtis Sliwa calls him, decides that, hey, these outdoor restaurants, they're serving more drinks than food, and you can't have people congregating around having cocktails. So they make this new rule where if you want to hear about government intervention, they basically raise the price of a drink by saying if you can't get a drink unless you buy a food item with it. So you want to get a drink, it's $10. But you got to get food with it. Oh, I'll take a bag of chips. That's $1. Okay. A smart restaurateur in upstate New York came out with Cuomo chips, a little bag of chips for $1. And if you buy a bag of chips, then you're eligible to get a drink. King Cuomo comes in off the top rope and weighs in on it. And here's what the government is now telling us on what kind of food we can eat to qualify to buy a drink. Okay? The State Liquor Authority reversed course and revised their edict requiring more substantial food. Okay? Cuomo, according to the new guidance, a bag of chips or nuts does not meet the food requirement. Sandwiches, soups, or other foods, whether fresh, processed, pre-cooked, or frozen, do pass muster. Okay? So now, and they go on to say, well, if you want to know what's right for you to eat, now they're giving us nutritional advice just to get a cocktail, okay? Other foods which are similar in quality and substance to sandwiches and soups, for example, salads, wings, or hot dogs, would be of that quality and substance. Now, I went into a little earlier that Kentucky Fried Chicken is thinking about making 3D chicken breasts now somehow, okay? They're saying salad, wings, or hot dogs would be of that quality. Other than salad, wings and hot dogs are not exactly the healthiest thing for you. And if you ever really want to get disgusted, like to the point of nausea, go online and watch a couple of videos of what goes into a hot dog. Okay? I don't even want to get into it now. And they are tasty if you slather on sauerkraut, onions, mustard, and all this other stuff. And there's nothing like a New York City tube steak, a little dirty water dog every so often for a snack. But you just wolf it down and don't think about what's inside. But these days in New York, he just raised the price basically to double because you got to order a burger or a hot dog or some wings to get a drink. So if the $10 drink needs a $10 food, the governor just doubled the price of a cocktail. And I'm trying to come up with a clever food that we be able to sell that fits within this, like a Jell-O shot, for example. That's food. We'll take a quick break, come back with more Liquid Lunch right after this. Welcome back, folks. All right, welcome back. I'm trying to dig into all angles of the maniac stuff going on in our world, but on the business front, lots of good things going on. The Dow is kind of holding right around this 27,000 level, down $120 today, but as I've talked to you many times before, there is seemingly some sort of reverse correlation between Bitcoin and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Many times when the Dow is up, Bitcoin will be down a bit, and when Bitcoin is up, the Dow will be down a little bit. That's in full effect today with Bitcoin up nicely at 9,500 and the Dow down 115 at 26,890. I warn you over and over that I think in the short term there will be one more spike of volatility that will knock the market down significantly. And one of the things brewing that it could be related to, I'll tell you, I don't know if you saw this story, but U.S. government gave the communist Chinese government 72 hours to close down their consulate in Houston. So, you know, I think China operates like 6 consulates around the country: San Francisco, Houston, D.C., you know, there's 5, I think there's 6 of them around here. And as our good friend Erin Elmore, the head of USA Strong, was telling us yesterday, that this China's Confucius program, where they give money to universities and academic institutions, they pump money in there so that they can get fake exchange students and exchange teachers over, like scientists and stuff, to be part of this program. And they all really turn out to be intelligence agents of China that they're trying to get into our country and get into our educational system. And they're doing a heck of a job on it. There is one particular Chinese supposed researcher who was doing some research at the University of Cal. And it turns out that the government started asking him questions, if he was an agent of the Chinese Communist Party, if he was ever in the army, and he's answering no, 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 and then a little cursory check. It turns out that the guy's an intel agent, and what does he do? He runs to the consulate, the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, and apparently, you know, if you're a foreign dignitary, you get to hang out in the consulate, and the law enforcement powers of the U.S. government don't extend inside the walls of the consulate. So they may be harboring one fugitive that we're looking for in the San Francisco consulate, and maybe more is afoot with Houston. And I can tell you this, back in December, when Donald Trump said he agreed to phase 1 of the trade deal with China, where China agreed to stop manipulating their currency, they agreed to stop ripping off our intellectual property, and they agreed to some small reciprocal tariffs. I said back then, we should be very fearful of an attack on our power grid. We should be very fearful on an attack on our Wi-Fi systems. We should be very fearful of an attack on our banking systems. And I said, you know, if everybody goes to the ATM tomorrow and puts a thing in and no money comes out, there will be panic in the streets. And China does have the technology to do that. Little did I know back then, they weren't going power grid, cell phone, banking. They were going for the grand salami, the pandemic, where they basically engaged in another deep macro deflationary practice of scaring the heck out of the whole world. So instead of being able to bring themselves up, they brought everyone else down a few notches. And that's the way they fought off phase 1 of the trade talks. There's a lot going on between us and China. The saber rattling is certainly intensifying. And if China comes out and says, hey, we're not buying any more U.S. treasuries, or we're actually going to start selling some of our U.S. treasuries, mark my words, folks, the market will be down 5,000 points in about a New York minute. Okay, so don't be so gleeful right now. But Trump could come up with some good ways to appease them. We can get over this COVID, and Trump wins, market's at 35,000, and we're all happy anyway. So that's how I think it's going to end up. We'll take a quick break and end this up right here. Come back right after this with my favorites. John Burnett and David Eisenbach are going to be here to mix it up right after this. All right, welcome back. We try to cover a range of topics on this show, and we always try to get you the best guests, and I say who know where the rubber meets the road. And every week, we try to do it every day, but sometimes our Republican guests are so strong that we can't find a good Democrat to go against them because they're all afraid of our A-team. But these guys are not afraid of each other, and they've been with us from day one. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they agree to disagree, and sometimes they completely disagree. But the best we got is right with us now. We're joined here by David Eisenbach. He's a Democrat, he's a historian, he's a professor at Columbia University and candidate for New York City Public Advocate, former candidate, and John Burnett, Republican Managing Director of One Empire Group and columnist for Newsmax, and candidate for New York City Comptroller. So nobody knows how poorly the state of our city is right now better than you guys, because you both ran for the highest levels of office, and I know you're both disgusted with our mayor, so we're on the same page on something. But I'm going to go to you first, JB. Trump announces a plan to send federal law enforcement now to Chicago and Albuquerque. We had Bob Barr on a little earlier today, former CIA analyst, former congressman. And he said Trump's well within his right anywhere there's a federal building being damaged, defaced, or attacked. Is this what we've come to, JB?
Unfortunately, yes. And, as your previous guest has stated, that the president has every right to go into a state or city to protect and defend federal property. That is clearly at the federal level to step in to do so when local government has either consciously neglected or shown itself to be incapable of protecting not only its state and city property, but federal property. And we've seen graffiti, we've seen vandalism, we've seen all types of things being done to courthouses and other federal office buildings. So it's within Trump's right.
David, I gotta think that you're not loving this.
No, I think it's just provocative. I think it's getting more and more people out on the streets. It's encouraging violence. And I'm disturbed, and I'm surprised you guys aren't disturbed by camouflaged troops walking through an American city, throwing people in the back of unmarked vans. Right?
I love it.
Because of graffiti. That's what's going on. That's what you guys are down with. I'm very surprised about that.
Look at the fires. Look at everything that's going on. In fact, look at Portland.
I'm talking about Portland.
Chicago and Albuquerque. He should actually double down in Portland. Why? Because Portland is on fire. Look what happened in the autonomous zones in Seattle. People actually got shot and murdered, David. Why? Because Democrats actually allow chaos to fester and develop. We can't have that. We're the country of law and order. We cannot have a breakdown in our society like this. Why? Because it just grows and becomes worse, David.
Yeah, David, when you said you can't believe we would like this. I love it.
Unbelievable.
I like seeing someone send in law enforcement. Don't say they're just spray painting. You sound like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she said these people are out. You said these people are out because they need a loaf of bread. They're not out for a loaf of bread. They're busting down windows of Gucci stores. They're not just spray painting. They're smashing cops over the head with bricks. I mean,
and they're killing
each
other.
It is.
Well, the Portland situation is about graffiti. Okay.
No, it's not.
And yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is the defense of the property of the courthouse. Okay. And it's overkill to send in camouflage troops, grabbing people off the street, throwing them into unmarked vans. This is not what America should be about.
The problem is you're not looking at the mentality of the people, right? And this is the problem with the values and ethics on the Democrat side, right? Look at what's happening in New York, right, and other places around the country with regard to law enforcement. And so we went from shouting at officers, buckets of water, throwing projectiles, now actually attacking chief of department, right? We've seen an escalation of violence, David. The point is, we don't wait until it actually mushrooms into something catastrophic. It's actually at that level now in some view, but we have to step in and curtail it, at least at the federal level, and work with the state and city level to the extent that they're willing to accept the help.
Yeah, Dave, I just want to say this, and I know, you've been in New York for as long as I have. You remember how New York was before Rudy Giuliani became mayor, right?
I do.
So one of the ways that Rudy started turning around the city was with, it's an academic study called the broken windows theory. And when you're talking about graffiti, John just made a perfect illustration. It started where they were screaming at cops, then they were throwing buckets of water on cops. Now they're smashing them over the head with bricks and baseball bats. So if you let them sit there and graffiti the building and nobody does anything, there's the broken window. What are they going to do next? Break down the doors and go inside, and it gets worse and worse. You got to nip this stuff in the bud sometimes.
Well, look, we disagree about how the way that.
What's your solution, David? What's your solution?
Yeah, give us your solution. How do we deal with these summer of love people?
It's not with rubber bullets and tear gas.
Give us a plan.
The key to calming down the situation has not been. It wasn't in Washington D.C. It wasn't in New York City. Was not this summer to put more violent cops or.
So David doesn't have a plan. He's like Biden. He doesn't have a plan. I don't understand what you're saying, David.
My plan is that there are
order
ways,
other than pushing a lot of social workers into these violent zones. What's your plan?
My plan would just start with this: you do not send.
You keep telling us what we should. You keep telling us what we shouldn't do.
Into a peaceful protest.
All right, but they're not peaceful,
and then
brother.
That is going to solve your problem of violence on the streets. It doesn't work.
You know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen, David?
It's not peaceful,
this is escalation, right? When residents of these cities see that the local police department and local under the rule and instruction and guidance of these weak Democratic politicians, when they see that they cannot control the city, guess what? The people will take it into their own hands. This is escalation. That's why it's important for those with the power and authority to step in and restore order. Why? Because we cannot afford for it to get to the point where people start taking it into their own hands.
Yeah, that's
the problem with that argument, John, is that the federal officers, troops, however you want to call them, in Portland, when they entered the situation, it has gotten worse since they've been here. It hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten better.
You're denying that the natural escalation, David. You know what we just did in New York City? We got rid of all of these encampments and everything else in front of down to where City Hall is. And guess what? They started removing the graffiti and the obscenities that were written on the courthouses, on the sidewalk, and so forth. Why? Because they understand that, you know what? Yes, we respect peaceful protest, but once it goes beyond that, we have to step in and clean this up.
And those protests didn't go beyond that.
Why? Because we're in New York.
Right, that's right, because the mayor probably got a call from somebody in the administration and said, hey, you guys got 24 hours to get everybody away from our federal building. Otherwise, we're coming in and getting rid of them. And de Blasio probably cowered, like the little coward that he is. He's he's only tall. He's not tall in strength, if you ask me.
John, David's talking a lot of smack. You know David's voting Republican the next 2 years.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'll do a little jab in here and there, but then they start agreeing on everything, and I'm just ringing my bell like this. But not today, and I think as we get through the next couple topics, it's going to get even better for you out there. So stay right there. We're going to mix it up with John Burnett and David Eisenbach right after this. Stay tuned. You're watching Liquid Lunch. Welcome back. It is a Thirsty Thursday. I know I may have mentioned that a couple of times, but I just wasn't up to speed yet. Now I am going back to the well with the Ponzoni organic vodka. I have some beautiful trio organic birch water in here. And now we mix it up again with the dynamic duo. John Burnett and David Eisenbach are here to join us again. Hello, boys. I don't know if you're partaking, but I need a drink to get through some of this stuff. The House votes to remove Confederate statues from the Capitol. And what's overlooked to me in this, David, I'll go to you first. You're a presidential historian. Many of the statues they're removing were Democrats after we came together, and no one's talking about how all these, Confederate slave owners were already having statues. What gives you?
Well, the Democratic Party was the party of the South. The Republican Party was the party of Lincoln and the freeing of the slaves and the
Ding, 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 ding.
So yes, Roger Taney, the Chief Justice who rendered the Dred Scott opinion, his statue is going. Democrat John C. Calhoun, the secessionist senator from South Carolina, the guy who argued for the positive good of slavery, he was a Democrat. His statue is going. I say, high time.
Wow, I don't.
We agree. We should get rid of all the Democrats.
That's an easy one. Let's see. Then let's see. Once in a while, we actually get major breakthrough moments where Democrats and Republicans can agree. I don't mind seeing all these Confederate statues go. I would like people to point out that the majority of them turned out to be Democrats who were, for slavery. But
John, let's go all the way, right? How about getting rid of Senator Byrd's statue, the former KKK Grand Wizard, right? Let's just go all the way and just wipe all of the Democrats away. Defund the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going back to Christopher Columbus, why should we stop anywhere? Let's get them all. And by the way, guys, I had a John Banzev. He's a great public interest attorney, and he brings these cases like Ralph Nader, and he's saying that the First Amendment right that many of these mayors are using to paint Black Lives Matter in the street extends to everyone. And if you have a nonprofit with a neutral message and you request, they have to do it. So I'm thinking about, petitioning New York City to put Christopher Columbus Matters somewhere in the city and see if they respond. I doubt that. But all right, Joe Biden, had another one of these cockamamie press conferences where he speaks off a teleprompter and has the questions already given out beforehand. And he said, that Donald Trump is our first racist president, I guess overlooking Lyndon B. Johnson, who was clearly a racist. And he said the way he deals with people based on the color of their skin, their nation of origin, is absolutely sickening. David, do you think that the president deserves to be called a racist?
Well, I'm going to leave that one aside. What I will say is Joe Biden is absolutely wrong with the accusation that Trump is the first racist president. A quarter of all of our presidents were slave owners. Woodrow Wilson reinstituted segregation into the federal government agencies when he became president. FDR put Japanese Americans in internment camps, and Andrew Jackson put Native Americans on the Trail of Tears. So he's definitely not the first racist in the White House.
And Joe Biden put millions of blacks and Hispanics behind bars with his crime bill in 1994
crime bill, unfairly incarcerated.
That's pretty racist, David.
Yeah, that is pretty racist. And by the way, I know I bring this up from time to time, but I still don't understand why it doesn't get the perception that I get in my brain. When Joe Biden was on with Charlemagne the God, and he said, if you're not thinking about voting for me, you're thinking about voting for Trump, you ain't black. That sounds about as racist as you can get, if you ask me, because it's basically telling one whole class of people, if you don't do what I say, you aren't what you are. That's like horrible, if you ask me.
Yeah, but the problem is that his opponent, Donald Trump, is sending troops in to crack down on peaceful Black Lives Matter protests, and
which are majority white people.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Well, it's not racist, David.
Yeah,
making the argument,
David,
make Donald Trump's attempt to make the argument that he is less.
Even black people in Chicago want law and order. They want to be able to walk down the street.
Yeah, David,
and
how do
live
you
free.
Yeah, David, how do you respond to the fact that a recent poll showed 70% of the people that live in inner cities want the police. They do not approve of defund the police.
I think that's probably accurate. I think that's accurate.
Okay. So then if the mayor or whoever the police chief responds to is defunding the police and not giving the people the public safety they want, doesn't the president, Bob Barr said it would be impeachable if the president thought his people were under attack and not being given the public safety if he didn't send in federal troops. So,
well, look, again, I want to separate the discussion of what's going on in Portland with the idea of augmenting anti-gun violence task forces with Operation Legend. I think that cities do need more help cracking down on gun violence. I just wish this happened last summer or the previous summer, not 3 months before
the previous administration under Joe Biden and Barack Obama. How about that, David?
okay.
Well, I'm saying gun violence was off the charts under Obama.
We got a wild
Donald
card.
Trump could have done something about it not 3 months before the election, years ago.
Well, we're doing something about it now. Let's live in the now. And I'm going to throw you guys, we got 2 minutes left, and throw you a wild card question. The other day, Trump was questioned on Ghislaine Maxwell, and he said, I don't know much about it. I wish her well. David, what do you think about that?
When you're defending a rapist, a pedophile in front of the press corps right there, that's never a good thing for the president to do. It's disgraceful.
Do you think he was wishing her well, meaning she doesn't get killed by the Clinton cartel and she stays alive to testify against all the people that were in that ring?
That's the way I took it, John.
I hope they're keeping her safe.
That's the way I took it.
I hope they're keeping her safe.
You know what, John? You know how executives, when they actually mysteriously have to leave an organization, they may have been there for years, and all of a sudden, everything that they've done, right? I'm not glorifying anything that Ms. Maxwell has done. I'm just making the analogy that they've been synthesized down as 2 sentences. We wish them well in their new endeavors. It's not coming from a good place at all.
Yeah, it's like
It's like
in this.
You know what? I really don't care, and the best to her, and may justice, be served.
Yeah, it's almost like down in the South when they say, "Oh, bless your heart." You know what I mean? They don't mean bless your heart. They mean you're a
guys,
moron.
It was preceded by Donald Trump reminiscing about how he knew her in the Palm Beach social circuit.
Reminiscing is.
It was not intended the way you're saying it. He was wishing her well, and
we're all wishing her well. We don't want her to get killed. All right, you guys. For whatever days you actually agreed on things today, we made up for all that. So thanks so much, boys. John Burnett, David Eisenbach, the best we got. You're watching Liquid Lunch. Quick break. Back after this.
For more Liquid Lunch, head over to YouTube, do a search for Liquid Lunch TV, and hit that subscribe button.
All right, welcome back. We're covering we going like, this is like Rafael Nadal. We're going side to side, coast to coast, front, back, left, right, all topics, all things are covered, all voices are heard. All you want to talk about and more is going on here. I'm having a trio organic birch water and Ponzoni organic vodka for today's Liquid Lunch session. It's quite good, might I add. And when I say quite good, that's what you get if you're thirsty this Thursday for real hardcore guests who know what's happening out there. And we're bringing right now a repeat guest, one of the great ones, just started joining us. Vince Everett Ellison is with us. And he's the author of The Iron Triangle, Inside the Liberal Democrat Plan to Use Race to Divide Christians in America in Their Quest for Power and How We Can Defeat Them. Vince, thanks for coming back with us. You the man. Everybody loved you the last time you were on. Your voice and your presence and everything is amazing. I had a public interest attorney on a little earlier, a very widely known guy, John Banzaf. He's a professor of law at George Washington University Law School. And he was saying that the same way the First Amendment protects the writing of Black Lives Matter on a street, that if people started to make a bona fide request for other organizations that aren't, even as divisive as Black Lives Matter, the municipalities have to grant those rights to put other political slogans. In one town, Rosewood City, they actually, instead of putting 1 million slogans on the streets, they actually painted over the BLM. This organization is a Marxist organization, and I try to say that as much as I can. Tell us more about what's behind this liberal coup that's going on.
Well, as I told you before, it's always been black pain for white Democrat gain. This is just a 21st century version of it. From 1800 to 1860, they used black pain to keep the black slaveholders rich down south. Then when Abraham Lincoln became president, they succeeded to keep them and tried to destroy the United States of America in order to keep their slaves, because they know they need black pain to stay afloat. And after the North beat them, they started Jim Crow, another 100 years of lynching, murder, rape, torture of black citizens. After the Civil Rights Movement, when they couldn't do that legally, anymore, they decided to control the black vote. And they used this iron triangle: black preachers, black politicians, and black civic organizers, which is BLM, SELC, the NAACP, CORE, ACORN, all of these groups, to make sure that they got the black vote. If they couldn't keep us from voting, they were going to control the vote.
That's right.
And that's what they've been doing.
So now
BLM is just part of that. Yeah.
So now let me ask you this. What the mainstream media wants to keep talking about, there's all peaceful protests and defund the police. 14 people are killed in a mass shooting in Chicago, but yet you have Mayor Lightfoot on TV saying she don't want the president's help and she doesn't want any federal agents coming into her city. Where does the insanity end, Vince?
Well, it doesn't, because one of the tenets of Marxism is that there isn't any inherent value in the individual. When you study the Marxist philosophy and then look at what Marxist governments have done to their people, you see that they've murdered them. When you look at Stalin and Lenin, Castro, Mao Zedong, what they're doing now down in South America, this is what they do. They don't care about the population. The population is supposed to do one thing. They are supposed to make sure that the collective survives, and that's the people on top. So they don't care about these people dying unless they are dying to cause a race war, which is what they want. They don't care. It has to be white and black. Black people have to fear white America, and then the white liberals say, we will protect you from white America if you keep us elected. Black people must say, I cannot make it in America. I am inferior. You are superior. The system is fixed against me. We need you to protect us. Here's my gun. I don't want to protect myself. I'm frightened. I'm scared. I'm a coward. I need you, Mr. White Man, to protect me. Please, Mr. White Liberal, protect me from those mean white conservatives. And they give them the power, and they lay down like the slaves they've always been, and they accept their protection, and they accept the subjugation, and they have these people on top who are getting paid, who are being financed, and who have been organized by the Democratic Party, the white Democrats on top. It's been that way for 220 years. This is just a variation on the theme. BLM is just a reiteration of the same thing they've been doing since 1800. Nothing's changed.
So Vince, I'm doing some, down the rabbit hole stuff, trying to look behind the scenes on some of these organizations and the flow of the money. I spent 30 years on Wall Street, so I'm trying to follow the money, right? And when you go to a lot of these Black Lives Matter, they have a boatload of money being spent on social media promotion where they're trying to get you to click on these Black Lives Matter memes. And then they take you, if you click the donate button, it takes you to an organization called Act Blue, okay? And then if you go to Act Blue and you look behind the scenes, and they're supposed nonprofits, so they have to list all their expenditures. Act Blue is a big supporter of both the ACLU and Planned Parenthood. And on their own filings, Act Blue has spent over $1 billion on political campaigns for Democratic candidates. So this is a whole machine that's working against us here, isn't it?
There it is, man. I mean, well, like I said, black pain, white Democrat gain. That is it. And it's going to continue until, we do something about it. But one thing's not going to happen. The GOP is not going to do anything. They're too cowardly to go down there. They're afraid of black people. They're afraid of going down there and dealing with people that they don't know or understand. So it goes back to us, the citizens, whether you be Christian, whether you be Muslim, whether you be Jewish, whether you just be an American. It's time for an intervention because we're seeing a cultural genocide happen in real time. Back in the 1980s, the early 1980s, Kwanzaa Kanjufu wrote a book about the conspiracy to destroy black boys. And he understood that before they could control the black community, they had to really, really get control of the black man. You have to do a few things to control him, though. Either avoid him, imprison him, murder him, or castrate him mentally and psychologically. And this is what you're seeing. You control the black male, then you can control the black community. And Patrick Moynihan said the same thing in 1965 when he wrote his great report and sent it to Johnson and said, we have to put the black man back in charge of his family. Well, the civil rights movement rejected that.
Quick break, come back and wrap it up right after this when we go down the rabbit hole.
Welcome back, folks. I've been taking my makeup off every day with the coronavirus wipes. I'm still corona free.
Breaking news. Despite my objection to this, and I had suggested Washington Redskins were holding a big powwow to see what their new team name was going to be and everything else. And I had suggested the Washington Foreskins, which I thought was a fair enough thing. It's like being used as one of the most natural and organic products now. Many celebrities are using foreskin moisturizers and everything, so it's like really good for you. But they obviously rejected that with this breaking news. The Washington Redskins will now be the Washington football team. I mean, you can't get more generic than that. And the next thing is they're going to say it can't be Washington because George Washington, the first president of our country, our first commander-in-chief. But anyway, let's hope that lives. We kick off baseball tonight, which is a good sign. Scary news out there, some other breaking news to wrap up the show today. Mike Tyson is going to be fighting Roy Jones Jr. in an 8-round exhibition match. This should be fun to watch. I'd love to see Iron Mike in there. The identity of the woman in Portland has been exposed. This just in from Barry Goldsmith that apparently it's the Land O'Lakes butter girl. That's what she's doing now that she's off the box of Land O'Lakes butter. But did you guys find any mistakes in my work today? Because you've been weak over the last few days.
And unfortunately, it's because you've been strong. You have absolutely been perfect.
Nah.
This is actually the longest streak I think you've gone on.
Hey,
and I am jinxing that right now. Me and Jess are.
Okay. So I'm gonna take.
This 4-day streak is wild.
All right, I'm gonna take the rest of this segment, being that my team can't even find a mistake in 2 hours of programming. So you see they're slacking there too. But Jess is never slacking, and she had a suggestion that because I've been so hot in not making mistakes, and I don't mean hot looking, I mean I've just been on a hot streak the last few days on not making mistakes in the show, that we find out now, and we're going to go down the rabbit hole for the last 2 minutes here, that I've been talking about Pizzagate, and the potential of, a child sex ring that involves Hollywood elites. And I've encouraged you over and over again to watch Out of Shadows, which breaks down the connection between the major TV networks and the Central Intelligence Agency. Now we find out that there's this QAnon the Q on it, and they talk about, these conspiracy theories and the big awakening is coming. It's hard to get a lot of real dynamic detail on it, but I'm working on it all the time. But they must be doing something right, because Jack Dorsey and the folks over at Twitter have decided to delete up to 150,000 accounts to stop the coordinated spread of disinformation. And apparently now, if you believe or even read or repost or tweet or reshare anything about QAnon conspiracies, you are in jeopardy of being canceled by Twitter. So Twitter continues to be a company that wants to call balls and strikes on your First Amendment rights. And if you read something that happens to be connected to a Q account, and you think, wow, that has a Freedom of Information Act document in it, which is a real government document, so it must be real, and you share it with a few of your friends, you may be canceled from Twitter. And you will be in the cancellation museum with Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima, Eskimo Pie, all the other ridiculous. And Twitter says, we've been clear, take strong enforcement on behavior that has the potential to lead to offline harm. In line with this, we're taking further action on so-called QAnon activity across the service. So, Q, keep up the good work. You keep up the good work watching and giving us feedback. And if you want to stay tuned on Facebook, we may do a little extended edition today, right after this. But if not, tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel, more Liquid Lunch just for you.